life, what comes to mind?
I think you take it for granted until something happens.
Yeah. I pulled a muscle on my neck today, and yep, I forgot that muscle was even there until.
You think it's never gonna happen to us,
Yeah,
you know, it's just,
all of it, everything
Old
from yeah, getting older to
you know, we see an awful lot at Luther Village.
yeah,
I have a wonderful couple that I met, and his wife has Alzheimer's.
okay,
It's really getting bad.
yeah,
They have a home in Florida, which they just came back from. And she walked into her place that she's been for
Yeah.
years and said, "Where are we?"
yeah,
Oh,
You know, and he said, "It must be awful."
yeah.
And she's physically healthy.
Yes, he's wonderful. You probably know him. Keith Dyer. You know Keith? No? He started this Bright something, I don't know, to help the
Interesting.
people that need it, you know.
wow.
So you're already hearing some of those threads of our physical and emotional, mental health, as well as kind of our social health, right? Elaine has made friends with these folks, and or the two people are in a relationship, and how health concerns are impacting relationships. And again, you know, asking, you know, probably this person knows a lot of people, and it's having an impact. Other things you think of?
We have two friends that recently lost their wives,
Oh yeah,
and to experience that with them, Dick will call one day and I'll call the next, and
yeah,
it's very, very hard putting yourself in that situation.
Yep.
They're both of the men are devastated because their wives took care of all the financial dealings and everything.
Oh, wow.
And now that's placed on their plate, and it's
Yeah.
very, very hard for them to deal with it.
yeah.
It really is. So we're trying.
Just that transition of having a life with somebody else, and that's how life and health
Right.
is defined. And now all of a sudden, right? We're not meant to live alone. We're not meant to, you know, to do this by ourselves. And so then to have to switch into that, it's a whole different thing. Yeah. So if you think of other things you want to share throughout, please feel free. We aren't going to leave this question, though we may talk about other things. In the text today, we hear two healings. There are two healing stories, but Jesus again kind of ups the ante on what a healing is. And so it's not just a healing in these two stories. And so that'll kind of be what we talk about, or what we're listening for in these. And so if you want to turn to Mark chapter 5, verse 21 to 43. We'll start there. Mark 5, 21. Okay, so when Jesus had crossed again in the boat to the other side, a great crowd gathered around him, and he was by the sea. One of the leaders of the synagogue named Jairus came, and when he saw him, Jairus fell at his feet and begged Jesus repeatedly, "My little daughter is at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her so that she may be made well and live." So Jesus went with Jairus. And a large crowd followed him and pressed in on him. Now, there was a woman who had been suffering from hemorrhages for 12 years. She had endured much under many physicians and had spent all that she had, and she was no better, but rather grew worse. She had heard about Jesus and came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak. For she said, "If I but touch his clothes, I will be made well." And immediately her hemorrhage stopped, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. Immediately aware that power had gone forth from him, Jesus turned about in the crowd and said, "Who touched my clothes?" And his disciples said to him, "You see the crowd pressing in on you. How can you say, 'Who touched me?'" He looked all around to see who had done it, but the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling, fell down before him, and told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace. You are healed of your disease." While she was still speaking, some people came from the leader's house to say, "Jairus, your daughter is dead. Why trouble the teacher any further?" But overhearing what they said, Jesus said to the leader of the synagogue, "Do not fear, only believe." And he allowed no one to follow him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. And when they came to the house of the leader of the synagogue, he saw a commotion, people weeping and wailing loudly. And when he entered, he said to them, "Why do you make a commotion and weep? The child is not dead, but sleeping." And they laughed at him. And then he put them all outside and took the child's father and mother and those who were with him and went in where the child was. He took her up by the hand and said to her, "Talitha kum," which means, "Little girl, get up." And immediately the girl got up and began to walk. She was 12 years old. At this, they were overcome with amazement. Jesus strictly ordered them that no one should know this, what had happened with the girl, and told them to give her something to eat. So in the Gospel of Mark, we lose one story. Otherwise, it's a continuation of everything we've been talking about, right? From way back when the leaders show up to call Jesus Beelzebub, the seed parables, Jesus calming the storm, and then the one we lose is one where Jesus goes to cast out a demon demons from somebody who is living in a cave. And so that's the only story we get, and it's in line with this, right? So it's not just an exorcism. It's a Jesus, does a big exorcism. And then now we have this healing story where Jesus does more than just heal them. As we're talking, the other thing that's important is that the two stories are nested into each other, right? We hear about Jairus' daughter to start with. There's not an interruption, but the second story comes in right when the crowd gathers around Jesus and the woman is healed. And then Jesus goes and raises Jairus' daughter from the dead at the end. And of course, it's intentional. The writer of Mark likes to do this so that we can think about both these stories they're connected to each other. The writer wants these two stories to kind of interpret each other so that you're thinking about those.
Why do you think Jesus didn't want the word spread then?
Yeah.
That's exactly what I felt too. Why did he not want people to know?
He does that a lot, doesn't he?
Especially in the Gospel of Mark. And so it's this part of this kind of rhetorical motif in which Jesus wants nobody to know that he's the Messiah until chapter 8.
Did Jesus really think that they weren't going to say anything?
But the joke, right? There's this whole joke, right? Like all these crowds, everybody knows, except Jesus keeps saying, no, don't talk about it. Right? And so it's just this kind of like, so that you ask, why would Jesus not want anybody to, and also this like laughter / kind of like amazement, right? Like, or I don't know what the kind of intention is, but like, it just spreads even more. That's all people want to talk about. And everybody knows. The demons know. The disciples, well, almost all the disciples, some of the disciples know, except the disciples are always the ones who don't know. Anyway, yeah, so that's, the fancy name for it is the Messianic secret. Secret. Jesus is the Messiah in secret right now, until the dramatic moment when Peter proclaims that he is the Messiah in chapter 8. And then the story shifts and everything starts moving toward Jerusalem. Jesus stops doing miracles, gives them even harder teachings, and then he ends up in Jerusalem and is crucified. So other things that catch your attention or other questions that come up for you as you hear this? So in the woman who is bleeding, in that story, the commentators point out that there are a lot of in the Greek there are a lot of words. They use a lot of words and a lot of specific Greek words to describe the anguish that the woman is in. And you could even start to hear it a little bit in the English. As I was reading it, it could be just because I was paying attention to it, but. Right, she endured much under many physicians. She'd spent all that she had. She didn't get better. She got worse. She was suffering. And so the writer spends a lot of time describing this. And so you really are meant to feel bad for this person and or get a sense for the struggle that she's been in for 12 years. And so it plays into this, it's not just a healing. This is something even more than that. Jesus is more than just a healer in this moment. And then the other thing that they point out is Jesus doesn't even know he's healing this person. He's not even consciously doing the healing. He just happens to be touched, and that's all that's required in this case. Apparently Jesus also knows when he's been
Such faith
touched.
she had.
Yeah. Right, and then back on that side.
His garment.
Yeah.
Be healed.
Yeah. And
Amazing.
and I feel like this is something we talked about last time too, but again, these people didn't really know who Jesus was. I mean, they have an outside perspective, and yet this woman had such tremendous faith. They also talk about the social implications of what an unclean, of what a woman, what this would have like socially been, right? This could have been very rude for her to touch someone in a crowd.
She was considered unclean.
Yeah. Right, which wouldn't have been a big deal. I mean, Jesus in a crowd probably with lots of unclean people, but again. It speaks to kind of underscore the woman's boldness and or that kind of moment of fear when Jesus does realize he's been touched. Not just touched, but that he's entered into a healing. Commentators also suggest that fear and trembling is not just fear that she's been rude and caught, but she realizes like this is a big moment. This is like kind of a God moment. Not kind of, it is a big God moment, especially for her. And then Jesus' response is also kind of a interesting moment, right? When he calls her daughter and tells her that her faith has made her well, points that out. And then he gives her like a blessing at the end, that blessing to say, what's he say? Go in peace and be healed of your disease. And so he kind of sends her with like a blessing. I'll send you with a blessing too, John. Take care.
Don't be offended.
Not at all. People come and go as they need to. It was good to see you.
She apparently expected to be reprimanded.
Yeah.
And of course, Jesus didn't. And then somebody pointed out, this young girl who had died, Jesus gave her a different kind of, he wanted them to give her something to eat. Sort of a caring
Yeah.
response, knowing that kids are always looking for something to eat.
Yeah, right.
It's a kind of like go on your way too, like eat, live. Let's see. Any more about the woman?
You know, somebody pointed out, I can't remember which I hadn't noticed before, that the woman with the hemorrhage had it for 12 years.
Yeah.
And then Mark emphasizes that the girl was 12 years old. And I don't know what significance that has,
But in some ways, he wants you just to intertwine the stories again. That somehow, right, these two healings are not just two successive stories, but okay. So the little girl, yeah. So then we kind of come back to the little girl, and people are just saying, don't bother this guy. It's done. There's nothing else we can do. And so then, right, Jesus calls her in kind of a unique way and just says, little girl, get up. In the same way that he kind of addresses the woman and calls her daughter. And then there's this kind of, actually before I go there. Yeah, so again, not just a healing, but he raises her from the dead. And so this is something that they haven't seen yet. This is again something more. Jesus takes it to the next level. And so then in doing that, then we also, in this story, we get it a little bit in the last one, but Jesus begins to introduce this like wider concept of wholeness and healing, right? So it's not just that they're brought back from the dead or the bleeding stops, right? But that they're given their lives back. Those social levels, where they've been ostracized, or they've been kind of lost from community or lost to their family in the little girl's case, right? They're brought back in now. This is, so they've been healed, but they've also been kind of healed in a social and emotional way too, right? And so the healing is bigger than that. And so with the little girl, the theme of sleeping and waking, right? You're asleep, you're dead to sin, and you're asleep, right? Is a biblical theme. And then you're awake or you're alive is another one. And then this idea that health is not just an absence of pain or just breathing, but it's bigger than that. And so Jesus embodies for them not just a healing, but a new life, a new creation that's bigger than just an absence of pain or fear or these things that they've had to live with, this struggle. So the commentators will suggest that that's the progression that we've been getting. Jesus is right in that beginning, way back when we first started a month ago. Right, Jesus is not just a teacher, he's not just a healer, he's not just casting out demons, right? It's bigger than this. Now, it doesn't really help anybody who's preaching this week, because they just, the point is, what we're seeing is the new, their line was, we're not just seeing healings and stuff, we're seeing the new creation, we're seeing the kingdom of God now. Well, okay, so I wonder what that looks like. So I don't know where Chrissy's going to go with it, but and I feel that same way too. Like we've got to this point, right? Okay, these great moments. Thank you for underlining these great moments, these great healings in the text. But now what? Right? Yeah. What is it? What more does it mean? And so we're kind of left to our own imagination for that. And so that we started with that question: what does healing and wholeness look like? And of course, every day that looks different. The other place I think, and it's also good that, service this weekend, this Sunday, the 75th anniversary focus is on service and our work, St. Mark's work in service ministries and the service projects and things we've done. And so, I think that also kind of hints at this too, right? That healing just isn't an individual act. Forgiveness isn't just an individual act, or something that happens just to single people, but right, it's about communities. And so the girl is alive again, but she's really alive when somebody gives her food and they feast together. The woman is healed when she stops bleeding, but she's really healed when she can come back into community with others. When she can find that emotional space to say, I struggled for all these years and now I'm healed. My faith, I got there. I persisted. Right, and even further, probably for her, when she can extend, when she can go and help somebody else, right? How many times, have we struggled through something, and then all of a sudden found that we run into somebody who may be struggling with something very similar, and then we find a new level of healing and health when we can struggle with somebody else too and help them. So I don't know what this new creation is being hinted at here for us, or where our imaginations might go, but I think as we reflect on those places we've been called to help and serve, I think there might be something there. Other things you think about or notice or have questions about with this text? I promised Elaine last week that I would have the list of what we're going to read ahead, and then I didn't remember until I was standing right here. So I'll figure out what we're reading next week and at least get that far ahead for you. Okay. So I have, if you want to write it down, it's Mark 6, 1 to 13 is our gospel for next week. Or if you just want to mark your page or your spot.
What is it?
Mark 6, 1 to 13. If you need a pen, I have a pen, or your neighbor may have a pen. Looks like everybody's good. The other reading is a fun one. I don't have any idea how it goes with the gospel, but it's a fun reading, so maybe I'll just give you that one too. And we'll do a double next week. The next week's is 2 Corinthians 12, 2 to 10. And I'll bring the list next week.